to really look at that and see how that's still, oh, and there goes Eugene again. But anyway, it was a great conversation. If anyone wants to go listen to it, it's on my Telegram, Justin Carpenter, and I put it up on my website, justincarpenter.org as well.
Yeah, sorry, it just happened again. But yeah, you were talking about the children, or the lady who was afraid to lose the children, and that's a huge thing with this matrix culling. Is like the sick and the impoverished in the mind will get more sick and more impoverished, and there will be a great divide. You know what I mean? And this is the thing. So I'm experiencing this with my dad. I'll open up to you guys. I'll be completely honest. Like he completely wants me to bend my knee to Caesar, to the Rockefeller Rothschild institution, and go the traditional route of being a medical doctor, a medical practitioner who's using all these chemical acid methods to treat acid problems, right? And it's like just imagine that, right? It's like that almost fuels me more to work harder to go down the natural route, because it's like now I know how much the sickness has just spread, and we have so much work to do. Yeah, but I've been going through that, so it's amazing that you bringing that up. It's the mirror for me, Justin.
Well, thanks, brother. And it was amazing. It was amazing for her to share that, because after that happened, and I shared my because today's show was all about surrender. I mean, truly, it was all about that surrender to God, and surrender to that higher aspect, and knowing that even when we're experiencing uncomfortable things, it's still for that highest benefit, no matter what. And so all we have to do is just trust that, just truly trust that. And so I told her, and I said, not to alarm you, or not even to but just to put it bluntly, the more that we have fears of something happening, the more we're actually inviting to have that experience.
Exactly.
So if you're afraid of losing your children, and them never coming back to you, you're inviting that experience to be had. So don't, obviously God is going to make happen whatever needs to happen, and free will cannot be infringed upon. That was another big topic that we covered, of just this pivotal aspect of free will and how it cannot be affected whatsoever. Anytime it is, that's when that negative karma does get accrued. Eugene, I think the fan might be turned on your phone, because we're getting a lot of
How's
getting a
that?
lot of background. Yeah, much better. But so yeah, that was just kind of the parting words for her, of just surrendering to God's will in each and every moment, even in those hard, most difficult moments. And of course I can say that, and it's much easier to say that than to put it in practice, because a parent's relationship with their child, I mean, that's got to be the hardest thing to let go of, but the more that we do, and when we love people unconditionally, to have that no condition, even if my child is not reciprocating that love in this moment, I'm still going to love them unconditionally. I'm not going to love them only if they love me back. That's not how God loves us. He loves us no matter what. So just coming from that space, and emulating that as best we can. So it was great to share that. And then other people shared their experiences about dealing with their kids and their family members, and just the struggle that it is living in a household with people who are in two different realms, two different spaces, and navigating that space. But it was just a really authentic and vulnerable conversation that these always turn into, because people are so willing to go there.
Yeah.
And I love facilitating that space. I love helping to cultivate that, so we can all learn together, because it's all it's all the same shit, and like, not to diminish or belittle or take anything away from what anyone is going through, but it's all the same shit. It really is. And so when we can recognize these similarities, these patterns that emerge, then we can see you're me. You're just
Yeah.
another aspect of me. Like, you're going through the same thing that I am. So let's talk about it. Let's share and compare notes. Let's figure out how you did it.
Yeah, the only
I
thing
don't
that separates us is a damn different body. The rest is the same, man.
truly, and that's not even really, it's just a perceived separation.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as the real one, and so the more we can acknowledge that, and acknowledge the separation that we do perceive, it provides such texture. It's such a beautiful thing to be to play with. Why would I not want to have this experience where I get to pretend like I'm separate just for a moment? I get to dip into insanity, into madness just for a moment, just to have this sort of in tandem between two worlds, get the best of both, and I get to either have the best of both, or or I get to have the worst of one. That's my choice.
Yeah, and this and before we get too far, I want to talk a little bit about that parent thing of you saying let go and stuff, because it's really paradoxical, because I think I've been feeling a lot more like a parent to my parents. Like I feel like the child parent role has been reversed. And so this is the thing. I think this is natural as old age comes, and you're supposed to look after your parents. It kind of, the roles get reversed a bit. And this is the interesting thing about ancestors, right? Because who's to say the children aren't the ancestors, right? Being reincarnated. I mean, I'm not saying that it is that, but I'm saying who can deny that that could be a possibility. So when you ask these kinds of questions, it's like, yeah, I feel like I have to take more responsibility for my own father, for my own mother, for my own sisters, and I have to become their parent in some sense. And this is not like like an egotistical thing, and I'm going to control them. No, 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 no. It's like now I have to have the wisdom to let them go as a parent. It's really weird and paradoxical. I don't know if you guys feel the same way.
Well, yeah, I kind of get hit on both ends with my parents, and then also I have kids as well. So letting go of my kids, my youngest is 7, my oldest is 22, and having that that space where I, really just honoring their journey, and having an understanding that we are all the child of God.
Yes.
We do only have one mother and father, but being the father of children, you still have this connection with them. There's still this spiritual connection that is there, even that they are is still a child of God. And to get to that point where um, really honoring their journey and embracing the path that's in front of them, and which in my case there was separation. I'm no longer in full contact with my son, or any one of my kids, and it is because of this path and this journey that I chose to go down. But knowing that that's what it was, and sharing along the way and trying to keep it together as much as I could, but getting to that point where I knew I couldn't do anymore.
Yeah.
I could. This is as much as I could do.
Yes.
And then
And can I add something real quick? I'm thinking, what if God feels that way about us, Aaron? You know what I mean? Like, what if he's looking at us like, I created this damn thing and I can't even control it? I have to let it go, like, as much as I want to micromanage, like it's its own living source, living being. You know what I mean, Aaron?
yeah, that free will that he provides in his laws, when he allows us, or when we choose to come down here and experience this duality, that free will that we can really, that's absolute. And that exactly what you're saying, God has that same thing. It's like, man, that's that free will that I gave him, and I can't even control him. I got to step back, and I'll be here, I'll be ready when they want to turn around. So that's aspect of my child. But then also my parents, I relate to what you're saying as well. Is there's a point where I feel like I was parenting my parents, but now having that to let them go as well, because they're not willing to grow any further. They're not willing to see these aspects that they brought to me that I just expanded on. So it's a very, very paradoxical relationship.
Yeah, life is
Yeah,
weird.
it is very strange, but once you start unraveling the sort of singular thread that weaves it all together, it's not very strange. It's actually quite methodical and quite consistent, but with enough mechanisms at play to make sure that it never repeats. Exactly. It's always different every
Yeah.
time. But the pattern that emerges is the same, at least in this iteration of the story that we're playing out. And until we play the story through its fruition, that to completely all the way through, then we will keep playing it. And so we might as well learn it because it's the only story to learn.
Well, you would say it's almost the mechanisms that keep this system together enough, because if these mechanisms, God laws, weren't so absolute, the other mechanism would actually tear us apart and just defragment us into oblivion. So it is the sole thing that is keeping this creation as cohesive as it is inside this insanity that we are.
And on this incarnation, there's like an element to a death, like in it, right? There's like a chaotic element in it, and this is the thing. So I think, like you guys were kind of saying, God's law is kind of like love, and love is the only thing that stands outside of this death kind of law or whatever it is, right? So it's very interesting that like Justin brought up the word mechanics, and I think again there is no mechanic in loving. You know what I mean? You can't like I used to play games, right? And I developed mechanics, but I can't develop mechanics on how to love, whether it's my parents, whether it's my children, you know, all of these things. So it's very interesting how yeah, it's almost like and this is why when I talk to Roger, I always say like you know, there's something different from us than robots, man. There's like, we're so much, like, I wouldn't say greater, but yes, in many regards too, you know, like calculation, you know, mechanisms, this thing, they always win. Like they win chess, whatever, a million times out of 1 to 1 or whatever. But there's something in man, there's some spontaneity. I think you were kind of hinting at that too, Justin, with that breaking of patterns, and it's always new. There's something different and random. That's such a great word that no one really goes into. There's something so random in man that, I don't know, that just that's what separates death and living. It's not mundane anymore. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Well, that's what free will provides. It is that spontaneity. It is that randomness, because with it, it's like this, we created this sort of tantalizing experience to dip into, and to really dip into it. And the fact that it is so enticing, it is so tantalizing, it is so invigorating to really step into. We want to continue stepping into it, but don't stray too far. Don't fall too far into it, because then it gets really painful to get back out of it again. So we're just like riding that line, you know, we're balancing on that point, falling, you know, going in between falling too much into this existence and getting absorbed by it, or losing
Justin,
sight
would
of
you
it.
say we're keeping free will in its right place?
Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
staying in the flow. Yeah, staying in the flow.
Yeah, it's that perpetual balancing act, and when you do it, it makes it so much better. It gets it, and it's going to happen either way, you know, that expansiveness, and that's all God really wants to do, is to expand. But the free will aspect is integral for that expansion, because without it, there's just replication, there's just duplication. You cannot have any expansion. It's just stagnation, you know, it's just the repeating. And so
Yeah, there's
you
no space to move.
no. And so you mentioned love as something that you can't replicate. You cannot
Yeah.
have an artificial love. You can
Yes.
come close. You can match all the patterns of what one does when they do love. You can match all the actions of what one does when they do love. And many out there are these robots, AI, that are just repeating these patterns that they've observed of ideas of love, or these concepts of love, but they don't actually love. And when the conditions start to come out, you know, and that's what I was suggesting in my talk earlier, when those conditions do come out of any sort, even if the conditions are perceived as helping the other, you know, pushing someone to a higher space, but if I'm loving them with condition, it's not love at all. That's not love. That's a it's a parasitical aspect of using another for
Yes.
you know, whatever that AI sort of trajectory is, which is the anti love, or the anti stability. It's the always enticing us into that chaos, and through that chaos is what causes that expansion. But don't fall too deep, you know, because it'll get you. So
Yeah, and I kind of want to go deeper into this, because this is the thing, because it's like, then we get into the idea of control, right? Because this is the thing. So if there is no control in love, right? That meaning there's no sense of volition, there's no sense of, we could say will, right? Because like, it's almost like the people you love without will. But at the same time, it's like love is also having a place for will, like having a place for my will, or my actions, my 10%, whatever it is, right? Like my identity and all of these things. So it's kind of very interesting in that sense, right? And then the weird thing is, it's like like I love my parents unconditionally, I love my sister unconditionally, but the thing is, it's like me seeing them to some extent is conditional. These are the paradoxes I wanted to discuss with you guys, because the thing is, my time is worth it, and the thing is, it's like, if I constantly stay there and I can't heal them, like if they don't want to heal themselves and therefore my presence isn't welcome there, then I'm only, basically burning more bridges, and I'm only worsening the problem and adding fuel to the fire. So in that sense, I guess it's kind of conditional, but at the same time, because it's unconditional, I'll always be forgiving of them, and I'll always welcome them back if they choose to change their ways. You know what I mean? So it's very interesting, that line we're treading with control, will, love, and all of these things. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, it still would be an unconditional love by loving them from a distance, because you have the foresight and the knowledge, the wisdom, and just the experience to see that your 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 continued interaction with them on a physical level would only bring turmoil to yourself and to them, because there's no congruence between the two realms that you exist in. So that's a responsible decision to say, I love you so much that I have to love you from afar. And it pains me to have to love you from afar. It can, sometimes, we have experiences with people who aren't have chosen are unable to see their children anymore because of announcing, their seeking of the truth, and they're not able to, just like Aaron was saying, you fall into these spaces where that. And so having that being so unattached from, well, how would I say this? This is like you love them so much that you know that it has to be this way, but you're also including yourself in that love. And that's the aspect where a lot of people slip into the martyrdom, where that would be, oh, I'm just going to stick around and not even give a shit about myself or my own well-being. And you can't help anybody. You can't really love anybody until you love
I would
yourself.
love to add real quick that martyrdom is attachment, is delusion, is illusion, is pain, is suffering, is all of these things.
Yes, absolutely. It is. And it's a very high pitfall, because it seems like, it seems like I'm being of service. I'm helping people of need. But if we do not include ourselves in the equation, if we do not include ourselves in that unconditional love, in that holistic aspect, then ultimately people are going to be drawn to us that will take advantage of that. That's when we
Exactly.
draw in the parasites. They start to come out, and they start to take advantage and harvest that, and we start to fall and falter and grow weary, and we cannot do it, and then we can't love anybody. Then we grow spiteful and vengeful and all sorts of other things. So it leads to all problems, a lot of them especially. But yeah, it's one to notice, and one I've fallen into many times, just being in that space of thinking I need to do more. But if people don't want to be helped, then that's the free will. That's I have to acknowledge that free will, and it would be wrong of me to consider otherwise.
Yeah, it's loving them with boundaries, right? Knowing that where your boundaries are, building that self-awareness, so you can love them unconditionally. I think without boundaries, you can't love somebody unconditionally, because you leave space outside yourself. You're nice. You leave yourself available for these other energies to come in, whether, more than likely they're not healthy, because that karmic repercussion, you didn't take the self responsibility needed to know that where your boundaries at, knowing that you could only extend so far before you're casting pearls before swine and they're not listening. And like what you said, you're kind of throwing fuel on the fire at that point. But then, once you figure out where your boundaries are, that's where it's at. But then you could clearly communicate with them. And like Justin said, is, hey, I love you so much, but I'm going to have to love you from here. And this is my clear boundaries that I have, but I'm willing, no matter what, as soon as you're, ready, or as soon as you want to, we could talk, I'm here. I'm not ever going to turn my back on you, but this is clearly as far as I could go. And that's how, a lot of what I pulled away from my experiences is that boundary. I tended to leave my space out there, and do a lot of what a lot of other people do, is overextend themselves. And then you have all this karmic repercussion, because you're not really taking care of yourself. You're not really living up to what's true to you. And you get reminded, because that's God's laws, and he reminds you of where balance is at and where the imbalance needs to be rebalanced again. So
yeah, and see, let's dive into that, because like you just said, there's a balance between boundaries and no boundaries. Very interesting, because so far we know that love is boundless, that it's all penetrating, it goes everywhere. But the thing is, as long as I'm in a material vessel, right? As long as I'm operating a ship, if someone is doing actions that is actively sinking my ship or causing my ship to go on fire or all of these things, it's like I love them, but I also respect and love my life and the people that will be affected if my ship goes down, such that I need to be able to tell them to get the hell off the ship, but I still love you, you know? So it's very interesting how it's a boundary thing, but it's not a boundary thing. It's almost like there's boundaries as kind of like a minimum wage, right? Like a minimal kind of a rule set, and then if that rule set is met, then we can go beyond boundaries. But if you're not willing to fulfill the few boundaries that I set in the beginning, we can't have a relationship. And it kind of reminds me of that poem where they're like, good walls make good neighbors or whatever. And when I first hear that, it's like, is that conditioning? Like, do we have to constantly live with walls and separation and all this kind of stuff? Or is that also, or it could be both, right? Or is that talking about good boundaries? So please elaborate on that, guys.
Well, yeah, I mean, you said it. No boundary should come without a path to redemption or a path through that boundary. And that's what we should always set and label clearly with each boundary is like, hey, I every time you talk to me, it's always dismal. I'm always, you're always wallowing in your own shit. You're always trying to bring me into it. My boundary is gonna be, if you call me again like that, I'm not gonna answer the phone until you can acknowledge that that's not a conversation that I want to have. I do not want to go with you into doubt and fear lane. I don't want to wallow in the shit with you. And so this is providing an opportunity for that person to revisit the conversations that they're having and to say, okay, I realize now what I'm doing. I'm being an energetic vampire. Maybe they won't see it in that moment, but it's one step closer to acknowledging it. And so by providing that path to redemption of saying, hey, just let's not talk about that kind of stuff. And we can talk all the time. Like that's the easy path, and that's just a simple example, but that's the same sort of thing we use with every boundary. Say,
Yeah.
okay, you've committed a violation in some degree, and whether that's my misperception or not, it doesn't really matter because I get to label wherever I want to enforce my boundaries. That's the sovereign ability of anyone. So if someone's enforcing a lot of boundaries that are unfounded, they're going to be found out pretty quick because it's going to quickly be shown that this is ridiculous. But if someone is setting boundaries appropriately, if infractions are occurring, every one of those boundaries needs to have a path to redemption, so that whoever does commit those violations can always have a space to get back. There's always a path back to that connection, which is the same that God provides us. It's not that he's not giving us, that restrictions or things to keep us from doing stuff. No, he's setting like boundaries so that we come back onto the path and we get back onto that path and come back home. And so we can set these same sorts of things as being, many representations of that one. So every aspect of our life should emulate that. And it's a practice that many are uncomfortable doing. They don't set boundaries, and then they get upset when their boundaries, they might set boundaries in their mind, but they don't verbalize or tell anybody. And so then they have these boundaries that are constantly being crossed because they haven't actually told somebody else what their boundaries are. And so then they get pissed off and it just spirals into something much worse. And it's because it's a practice that we don't do. We don't practice this very foundational, very fundamental aspect of just communicating and relationship and all these sorts of things. Setting boundaries is such a crucial part of it.
Yeah, 100%. And again, yeah, Aaron, did you want to say something real quick?
Oh no, I was just doing real quick. Just most people don't even know that they're outside of themselves. I mean, that's just the self-awareness that we get to learn. Is that first awareness is that we've been living outside of our own boundaries, and this is why we're having all these, black cloud or whatever it is that these people complain of. That's to follow them around and not knowing what it is, and God hates me, and everybody's against me. It's just the unknowing, and like what Justin said is like it was just never taught to us. It was never practiced. It was never part of our upbringing where we had the virtues plastered in front of us where as a young kid we knew how to live virtuously and knew what each one felt like and stuff. So that was it.
Yeah 100%. And I don't really know where to go, but I will say this. It's like that strong boundaries, like you said, Justin, it stops any kind of being taken advantage of. And I think yeah, people again give up in that martyrdom. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was how boundaries or a limit can often be like a goal or like a wall one has to get over. So I will give it to Raji that it's pretty genius that he said like in the lower realms there's a lot more rules, and as you get closer to Eden there's less rules, because it's like once you're more sovereign, you know the rules by heart. You don't need a piece of paper to remind you. You're tapped in. And you know the only rule there really is the rule of the self, is the keeping the self in check, because if you damage someone else you're damaging yourself. And then once you figure that rule out, it's like well, what other rule is necessary, you know? And that's the golden rule, right? Treat others how you want to be treated. It's like, so yeah, it's very interesting how it's almost like the rule is there to go beyond it. However, you have to be responsible enough to bypass the rule. So yeah, it's just very interesting when we go into these words: boundary, control, will, volition. You know, the things that I'm setting down versus love, which can't be set down, and all these things. It's like, yeah, it's confusing, but it's not. You know, it's there's a lot to talk about, but there really isn't. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, rules are always suggestions growing up in my world, and also I always think that rules are for the minds that can't think. You know,
Yeah.
they can't think on their own, so they need rules to
Yes.
tell them where to go.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like it's like Trump emphasizing the rule of law and
Yeah.
still supporting the police and the military, still supporting building a wall and border enforcement, and because
Exactly.
we are so fallen in our current state that we have to start all the way at the base level, which means that we need to make sure that God's laws are being enforced everywhere. And if they're
Yeah.
not, then if we're allowing these infractions to occur on our watch, then we're going to accrue that negative karma collectively. You know, it's not just going to be an isolated that one individual accrues that negative karma. Sure, they will. Whoever committed that action, that infraction of God's laws, is going to accrue that negative karma. But if we do not address that, then we all absorb that negative karma. We all take it, and that's where we collectively are. As there's been a whole host of wrongdoings that have been committed left and right, and because that's happened and it's gone unaddressed because we haven't done anything about it, then now we're suffering this sort of calamity of coming back to this where justice is restored, where there is none of that. And so there probably will have to be rules enforced, and boundaries and enforced, and borders. Colleen mentioned on the show the other day, the one they did last night, about how she doesn't want there to be borders and she's never liked borders. And of course she doesn't, because she's already there in the Garden of Eden. She doesn't want there, she she's already ready for that stage. But collectively we're not. Collectively we are not ready for having this open border, free traveling space, because there's still people willing to hurt people. There's still willing people
Exactly.
to harm others, to traffic people, and all sorts of other things. So
Yeah.
until we've addressed every ounce of that, that's when the walls can start coming down, and that's when we don't have to have the rules. And because like you said, everybody knows it. It's we can trust again. I can trust a stranger with my life. That's the space where we need to get to. The
Exactly.
children can go play out at midnight and with
Yeah.
no worry whatsoever. Like,
Exactly.
until we get to that space, then yeah, there have to be a lot of rules, and we have
Yeah.
to enforce them quite diligently. But no rule can stray outside of the law. The law has to be the reign supreme. The rules are the little nuances that fit within that law. And until there's a collective just stabilization, then that's where we have to go. But as you can imagine, there's going to be a counter narrative by those who always seek to instill chaos within everything. The seeds of the cabal, or this parasitical aspect of nature. They're going to try and poke at that aspect. They're going to poke at this. Oh, these are the new tyrants coming in, setting all these arbitrary rules and forcing people to do things and blah blah blah. And so that's going to be the new him and haw that they're going to give to try and get people to revolt and overthrow any righteous ruler, and then allow that power vacuum for the dark ones to sneak back in there. So that's going to be the counter narrative that's going to play pretty regularly. And I think that's why Trump is getting ahead of that so much with the whole, we got to have police and we need more police. And, we've got to clean up the police forces too. We got to get rid of all this corrupt nastiness. And I think I think some police forces will be cleaned out completely, or at
Yes.
least for the most part. But that doesn't mean that we take away the role in society of those individuals for now, knowing that eventually we get away from this space. Eventually we're going to move away from this, the government to end all governments, the central organization to end and make sure we never go back to this. But we have to do it incrementally. We cannot skip steps. We have to transition properly. Every aspect has to be transitioned in the right way. We cannot skip steps.
And that brings me to I think no rules is right behind that is more responsibility. So yeah, the less rules there are, the way more you have to take responsibility. And so you were saying incremental, Justin. I think it's very plausible that there will be systems outside with less rules, more Garden of Eden type systems, or communities. And basically it'll be like a permeability kind of thing where there's like the straight up matrix, and then there's those like communities like us kind of a thing, and then there will be kind of a back and forth and kind of a testing and a filtering and all these kinds of things. And yeah, because yeah, it's kind of, it brings me to, I remember one guy said in a group of takers, a giver stops giving. So that's the thing. When you have a community of givers, you have to make sure there aren't any takers. And not saying that don't take it all, because giving is taking, right? It's the same action. But I'm saying trying to sustain and profit and how do you say, like exploit others, what others have to give. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, and that kind of, I see that very clearly, that kind of separation will happen as we all kind of acclimate and transition in our own time. It'll be completely regional, completely communal, community based, and however people want to respond and step into their true selves, and how long they want to stay rooted in that old experience. I mean, you can just look at the example of eating meat, and how that, what is that truly? It's a satanic ritual pushed onto us. It's a energy harvesting vampiric way of life that we've been tricked into participating in.
yeah,
Now, many will acknowledge that quite quickly, and many will acknowledge that that's a wrong practice to participate in. But there will be many who will hold on to that, many who will sustain and want to maintain that. So just that point alone, you can see where you could have a whole region where people are like, no, there is no killing in this region whatsoever. There is no consumption of flesh or death in this region whatsoever. That is a condition of entering this space that has to be adhered to. And then you'll have other regions where that practice will still be put into place. And, so you'll have a whole spectrum in between, and all sorts of theirs, but that's just on food, so you can imagine a whole range of topics of hard points where people get stuck on, and there's a whole spectrum in between. So you'll have communities that will have whatever range within that spectrum, all over the place. And then, like you said, there will be natural filters in between. Those sort of hardcore communities on both ends of the spectrum will kind of be the more gravitational pulls. People who are more hardcore will gravitate towards those, and then those who are not quite as hardcore will be on the outskirts of those communities. And so that will be the natural filtration of people who aren't ready to go all the way into either still staying rooted in the experience or moving higher, but they want to be somewhere in between, and so they'll be on the outskirts kind of filtering that. But
yeah.
the border enforcement will be very important to make sure that those rules are maintained, and that anyone
Like
coming into
elves.
that space, yeah, exactly, and under quite a lot of not threat, but just under severe punishment if those are violated, because
Yeah.
this isn't a game. It is a game, but
Yeah.
it's one to take
It's a
seriously.
serious
It's a very serious game.
game.
But it's going to be amazing to witness. It's going to be fucking crazy, because
Yeah.
you can imagine, all wars for the most part have been bullshit in our
Yeah.
written history. We're going to have some things, some skirmishes and all sorts of things come up that will be actually legitimate, like two groups of people that are just fucking pissed at two different ways of being, knowing that we're moving out of that space of artificially created conflict. So we're moving out of that, but there will still be very real conflict. There will still be very real differences of opinion and how people come about. And so that's going to be intense. And
Yes.
we're going to be over on one end, just pissing off most people with just
Yeah,
this
no, we're
hardcore,
already pissing off so many people.
just so mad at us. And there was one woman on the call today too who was like, really struggling with dealing with people who are just, they hate her because of her light. They just
Yeah.
hate her. And she even said people that are within her own home, she struggles with just knowing how to be around them, because every time, every moment that she finds more joy, it seems to bring them more of a reason to throw stuff at her and do. Yeah, exactly. And this is the kind of, this is a feeling that we all kind of need to get used to,
Yeah.
because it's going to continue to happen. There's always going to be one end of the spectrum, and there's always going to be another end of the spectrum, and the whole spectrum can move. And that's what is happening right now. The whole spectrum's moving. It's like, you better be ready to move, because we're moving at least somewhat. we're moving the spectrum, but there will still be both ends of the spectrum, and they will still hate each other. And everywhere in between, we'll kind of pick that side, and or not hate each other, I should say, because I don't hate
Yeah,
anyone.
exactly.
But
One side won't hate, but one side will.
yeah, one side will definitely hate, and they will try and inspire as many others to hate the ones that they hate every step of the way. So that's the role that we chose, to be the perpetual shit stirrers and pokers.
And let me add something pretty interesting here. Perhaps love is no choice. Perhaps like entertain this, right? And then hate is choice. And this is the thing. So basically, where was I going with this? So when you do something that is natural, I think there is no choice. So when you choose to do something, so when you do something unnatural, usually it's through choice. Does that make sense? So when we're describing these communities, I almost feel like basically the people that are willing to shed their skin and just do what's natural, it's almost like, see, this is where it gets paradoxical, Justin. It's like will, like divine will, meaning like natural will becomes no will at all. Like becomes like this is risky. I'm going to say that divine ego, there is no such thing as divine ego. But what I'm saying is the ego put in the right place where the parasite is in check, right? So that ego put in the right place is no ego. And so this is the thing. So it's like when I'm attracted to a girl, or when I'm hungry and I eat food, it's not a bad thing. You know what I'm saying? It's natural. Like my hormones, my biology is developed in such a way where it reacts like that, where if I'm hungry, I start salivating. So with these things, it's like now it's I think it's all about just putting it in its right place. And then once it's put in its right place, it's almost like no choice, because this is the thing. So like even with food, with you were mentioning with meat and stuff, people are choosing to do these things. But what we three have in common is we see that there's no choice but to eat what's healthy. You see what I'm saying? So it's very interesting. But at the same time, I'm still choosing what healthy foods I should eat. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, on some aspect, to the point of God gives us free will. Once we learn how to allow him to shine through us clearly, then we can give that free will back. And that's where that no choice comes from, is that there's no choice. We know that, eating life is going to continue our life. So there is no other choice in our mind, because we're allowing that God to come through us, and we're giving that free will back, saying, no, I don't need to dip down in that,
exactly.
that insanity anymore.
I've been thinking, what if will is a curse? What if will is suffering? Because as long as we use that will to go away from God, right, then we're fucked. But the thing is, the moment you give back your will to God, then there is no will really, right? Like there's no own volition. Like everything, even I'm speaking, just comes out naturally. Like it's not my will. It's just how the conversation is flowing. These kinds of things. It's like at some point, it's like, is there will at all? That's what I'm wondering. And so maybe the lower you go in the kingdoms, how there's like outer realms and stuff. There's more will involved there. But once you get to like the upper echelons and the higher frequencies, it's almost like will is a thing of the past. I mean, and it's not like a slavery thing. It's almost like the free will is the enslavement. Because as long as I think I have this will, but see, this is the thing. This is the paradox. I always have to clarify. So when the will is put in its right place, like even though I'm cooking my food or I'm making my food or whatever, right? Like I'm thinking and I'm speaking, because speaking is still the thinking mind and all these things. And I'm using a medium, a materialistic medium, and I have an ego and I have a beast. Like even though I have all these things, it's like once I put it in its place, it disappears. It's almost like pain, right? Because it's like when you feel pain, it means something's wrong. So if the self is pain, as long as I'm feeling the self, right, then something's wrong, something's in the way. So when there's no pain in the way, when there's no self in the way, then the body is fully functional. Does that make sense? So it's really weird when we talk about these subjects. So, and I think I can only talk about it with you guys. So I don't know.
I kind of dip back into the rules and our sovereignty. As we start shedding the rules and realize our sovereignty, we gain a lot of power, but we also gain a lot of responsibility. But they were kind of like shedding that old self, that old identity of that free will that we used to have, of those choices that we used to make, and re-identifying ourselves through the image of God and giving back that free will, and the clarity, or we're releasing that, and that my brain just went dumb. Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Justin, were you going to say something?
Well, I just to kind of add on to what is will. Would you consider virtuous acts? Would you consider that will? Would you consider spoken word that's virtuous? Is that the will of God, or is that and of course it is, but which will is this? Is this the free will that I'm taking? Is this taking a thought, or is this acting in congruence with the highest order of continuation? Which, I mean, all this is a thought, right? Without thought, there is no experience. Yes. So without will, there's nothing. There's nothing here. I mean, there is no thing here, but we're
yes,
pretending.
Exactly. And so this is the thing. So it's like with virtue, it's like there's no option to do what's wrong. However, you know what I mean? Like we can always say we're choosing the option of doing what's right, right? But it's really weird in this regard, because it's like something's coming into my head with a Krishnamurti saying trying, right? So when and Yoda says this too, he's like, just do or don't try. So I think this is what that trial error is coming at, is because when we try to do good, it's often pseudo-moralistic. You see what I'm saying? When we try to do what's virtuous, it's often non-virtuous, and it's derived from a incoherent motive. However, when we look at what is not virtuous, what is wrong, when we go at it that way and say, I'm just going to, instead of trying to be good, I'm just going to face the evil aspect in myself. And then a virtue naturally, without choice, grows. So maybe that's what I'm trying to get at, is I don't know. It's like if you try to control yourself to be virtuous, that very trying to control yourself to be virtuous is a non-virtuous act. However, it's like when there's no control and I naturally become virtuous by looking at my non-virtuousness, that is also kind of control, So it's really weird. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, and this goes back to what we talked about earlier, of this kind of perpetual balancing act. It is madness that we're playing with. It is madness that we're operating with, and it does have repercussions if we're not careful. It definitely has consequences. If it's like playing with fire. You don't just do so willy-nilly. You don't just go around burning everything and see what happens. No, you need to respect that element, respect the force that it represents, respect what it can do, but through the respect of it, then you're able to create all sorts of things. You're able to utilize it in a way to where it is in that benefit. So this is the same space that I'd say we dance with will, but it's not even. I like the terminology that it's really not. It's just it just is, when
Yeah,
we don't try,
exactly.
it just is and
It's a-
happens, and there's no effort to it, there's no trying to do it, there's no because like you mentioned, if we're trying to be virtuous for the sake of virtue, if we're like seeking the rewards of the virtue by being virtuous, then we're not really being virtuous at all. We're being self-serving. We're just trying to manipulate the system in order to do this kind of way. That's the sort of lawyer loophole way of looking at
Exactly.
things.
The left brain way at virtue, and so this is the thing. So it's like, let's give a game as an example, because we're in a game, but let's reduce it down to a simpler game, right? When you play a game perfectly, in some sense, you have no option but to move in that certain way of perfection. So when you play a game perfectly, you move without option, if that makes sense. It's like this is how you bend the rules in some sense. It's like you make the right moves because you have to, and this is, I guess, like the samurai, merciless. I mean, I guess it is mercy, but it's like being swift, because it's like he has no choice but to react at that moment perfectly in that time, without thinking, without control. But in some sense, basically what he's doing is clearing his control, or how do you say it? It's like he's making his control a medium for that which is obvious, that which has to be done now. And so, yeah, that's a very interesting thing. Again, it's like, so again, thought is just a medium, and like you referenced, Justin, just now, it's like when the medium tries to claim the goods of God, that's when everything, all hell breaks loose. But once the medium kind of says, I don't know, that I guess the medium's control over God is an illusion, that's when the magic happens, I think, perhaps.
It's like thought clouds our connection with God.
Yeah.
Once we could, take no thought, that connection with God, that clarity comes to us, and now we get to that higher self where we're not practicing free will, because we learned that connection with God. We know that song, we know that frequency that He provides. So then that free will goes away, and then we can move exactly where we need to move, because that connection with God is moving us, and there is no other movement, because that's that fine line to get us to that perfect game, to get us, to go exactly where. Because if we make one move off of that fine line, we get a restart on the game, because the game wants us to win. So it resets us, and then we get to learn exactly where we are. But that is that learning, that frequency of God, and always moving with Him.
I think that's the target, Aaron, because isn't will thought, right? What I think of is my will. And so as long as you clear the thought, you clear the will, there will be no problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, just to use a video game reference. And Eugene, I want to do a show sometime on video games and just kind of the
Sure.
elements that you
Yes.
can glean from them. But just this, if you've played a game and you've beaten it, a lot of times there's an end game, and this is the space to where you've beaten the game and you unlock sort of extra abilities, or you're able to travel freely within the game, or all sorts of things. So when we're operating in this space of truly letting go of our will, we've paid that dime, we've paid that price, we've given that 10%, acknowledging that it is only 10%, and it will never be more than 10%. And then as 10%, I give it to God. This is that space where we unlock this end game, and we can operate in this space without the levels, because prior to that, we had to go through the levels. We had to go through these stages in order to get to this space. We had to continue going through turmoil and fighting bosses, and going through all sorts of different stages and challenges and all sorts of different things. But then you get to end game, and it's completely open, and it is just where am I going to well, and I guess even in that sense, you'd still be exerting will, pointing your character at a particular place. But in the true end game, I'm not even pointing anything. I'm truly just saying, like, hey, whatever, because I know that you've got the best vantage point. You're the one in the controller seat, so you can see
Like
everything clearly.
water, no?
Yeah, exactly. So it just is this, but that only comes when you've fully gotten to that space of absolute trust, absolute surrender, absolute willingness to let go of will. You know, you do have to will yourself to let go of will. I mean, it is that's sort of the madness to it, is you have to go through with it and go through, you know, and this is where a pitfall that a lot of people within the truth community and the spiritual community, they fall into this sort of like love and light space of not wanting to
Yeah.
acknowledge the darkness and
Oh
not wanting to confront the
gosh.
dragon, not wanting to beat the evil. And it's like, no, you cannot skip that step, because we have so much work to do in that space. And until collectively, until every ounce of all of us, where we go and we go all, until everything has been addressed in
Yes.
that regard,
Hey, Justin,
then yeah.
I would love to address that more, man, because that is we need to smash that as hard as possible, because I think that's the biggest stepping stone we have to step on now, right? It's like yeah, okay, thought will, I think it's also desire, because I will do something means you know, there's an implication of want. And so what these spiritual communities are doing is saying, I desire to be free of desire. That's what they're doing. They're saying, through desire, I will be free of desire. And because I desire a desireless life, I will be this magical fairy that just floats around, just it's just, there's no base to it. There's no foundation to it. It's like, yeah, I don't know. It's like, it's also these people that ignore the animal in us, like the beast, the mark of the beast, all these things, like you said, the dragon, the ego. It's like, when we say ego death, that doesn't mean we pretend like we don't have an ego. Does that make sense? In fact, it's the opposite. It's the fact that the pretense that there isn't an ego stops. And then once that pretend that there isn't an ego stops, we can deal with the problem, the solution, the ego, right?
Yeah, with continual acknowledgement that it's there. You know, if anyone tells you that they've defeated their ego and they don't have one anymore, run. Run away from that person. Run far away, because it is a part of this process that is it is integral to this experience. We must have this aspect of self in order to even have this experience. So it's very, very important. But it's a challenge that grows with us. And so if we're not ready to acknowledge that its existence, even then it's deceived us to such an extent. It's gotten us so badly. And we're apt to do anything. And that's why when someone reveals that who is running the show within their space, when someone reveals who's truly, have they surrendered their will, or are they still willfully controlling that in every sort of space? Are they still plotting and planning and thinking and scheming? If someone reveals themselves to be in that space through these kinds of, be cautious interacting them, be cautious dealing with them, because it is, Aaron Gorn posted a beautiful quote from the Matrix talk, and let me read it real quick because it was just really good. I read it on the show earlier, but the quote was so from the Matrix. I'm not sure who was saying. So the Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. But when you're inside, you look around. What do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged, and many of them are so inured, so hopelessly dependent on the system that they will fight to protect
Yes,
it. So
exactly.
be cautious of people when they reveal themselves to this space. And that's why it's such, going back to the high level pitfall of, I don't have an ego, or I don't want to acknowledge the darkness within me or within anybody else, because I'm all love and light, and I'm 12D and I'm out of that space. And I don't, when people do that kind of stuff, that means they are so consumed by that self-serving parasitical aspect of self that they are apt to do anything. And I know that sounds harsh, because we deal
No.
with a lot of people, and it sounds harsh, but it's very true. It's very, very true. And that's a big pitfall within the spiritual community, is this spiritual bypassing of saying, I don't want to acknowledge the hero's journey. I don't want to acknowledge all the steps that I have to do on this space. I just want to pretend that I've already gotten there. I've already gotten to the finale, and I'm just going to pretend like I'm
Spiritual
already there.
privilege.
Yeah, right. and then it's elitism too. And then
Yes.
they exert that superior sense of self, as if I'm somehow better than, and I've reached it. And so it's full of pitfalls all along the way. And of course they place them there, and this is the same shit that they did with the religious systems as well. It's just the same sort of um you know cultish superiority of finding some sort of avenue to give your ego a propped up space, to where your ego pretends it's God, pretends
Yeah,
it's your higher self, and it's
yeah.
tricked you so bad that you think that you're following God, but you're just following the devil right to hell.
Yes, and those people, those lukewarm people, are the most dangerous, where they justify their wrong actions through God, and then through their repenting and all this stuff. But see, this is a very interesting thing. So I think that I am enlightened. A man who says I am enlightened, right, and a man that says I am not enlightened is trapped by his will. So I'm saying both statements are wrong. And please tell me what you guys think about this. But basically saying again that I have reached everything. I'm done with my journey. I'm basically, again, I've saw the light, and then it's over. I am the light now, whatever. But the back end of that saying, I will never see the light. I'm blind, and forever I'm forsaken. And I think both of these are an act of will. So when we remove will, there's only observation without will. So without reason, without any sense of fueling the parasite, fueling the self, you just look. And then in that looking, there is no I am enlightened or I am not enlightened. There is no I that is seeking to be enlightened or seeking to be damned, So, what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, great point, because any type of label is that sign of separation. So whether it is I am enlightened or I am not enlightened, any type of that type of thought, and for me, it brings in that separation. It's that ego wanting to puff up itself or say, I am this, I am that, look at me, or don't look at me, whatever, whether it's shame or whatever the ego's energy that it needs to reflect and get back. It's trying to, then the same thing, we were speaking about earlier, where, like trying to meditate. Well, you don't try to not think, by trying to not take any thought, you're taking thought. So it's the ego kind of just being the meditator, and same thing with, the love, the love and light, I'm just love and light, and, nothing. Well, no, it's your ego just telling you that you're love and light. It's the labeling of oneself. And once you get past the labels and you're not anything other than you and the light that you are, I mean, that's the only, I know that the point where that clarity comes in, because there is no label. You are not one or the other.
Yeah, I mean, they're both lies. They're both false realities, and that's the only space that our ego will have any perceived sense of power, is in these these false spaces. So I'm not good enough, or I'm better than, that this is just the same sort of, and it's the same sort of trap that people fall into with this victim and
Yes.
abuser
You took it out of
relationship
my
too.
head.
It's the same shit. It's the same stuff, because you've got these two roles and they need each other. They need
Yes.
each other. They need
Yes.
each other. They
So
have to have each
thought
other.
plays both victim and victimizer.
Yeah, it is very funny when you look at it, because you've got this sickness that has convinced itself that it is something outside, and it is something, so it's either a perpetrator, an abuser, or a dominator, or it's a victim, and they love each other. Well, they don't really love each other, but
Yeah.
they
They hate
are
each other, but they hate love.
they hate each other, but they cannot help themselves but be attracted to each other, because they need each other in order to fuel their own false sense of reality. And that
The
false sense of
Matrix in a
reality
nutshell.
yeah, it falls apart as soon as anyone who's outside of that victim dominator relationship role, whatever, it comes along, and they're like, fuck you, how dare you come be a threat to my reality that I've built for so long, where I am this victim, and I'm only a victim, and my home is in my sorrow, and my comfort is in my wallowing, my comfort is in all this suffering. Or you've got the dominant tyrant, whatever, and they found their home in that lie, in the fact that they can somehow view someone else as separate than themselves and can dominate and control them, like, but
Exactly.
those two roles very much need each other. And so that's why, again, when you recognize that someone is within that space of being consumed by that way of thought, if someone's always outside of now, be cautious. And many are stepping in between. Many are coming from one to the other, and they're coming back and forth. And when someone's doing that, that's a different story, because there's acknowledgement of the now realm. There's acknowledgement of the space outside of that. And as long as someone acknowledges that, then there's hope in that moment. But if someone is never coming into that space of now, be very cautious, because you never know what they're going to do, and you never know what sort of plan, because it's not the will of God that they're acting in. They're acting in some isolated sense of being that creates
Yeah.
all sorts of pain and suffering for themselves, but then of course that bleeds out and goes to other people too. So yeah, all that.
Yeah. Wow. Was it? I think it's maybe in 10 or 20 minutes we should end this, but this is fascinating. And I'll just add to that right there. I think Cain made a mistake because he acted outside of the now. Because if Cain was just, remained in the now, he could have just done better than Abel next year. No problemo. But he was so consumed by that identification of a failure. You see what I'm saying? And so in the same regard with the Matrix, it's all about control and authority. And then it's like, once you ask the question, who is the authority, or who is the controller, and who is being controlled? It's like, again, it's like it's a shit show. It's all a game, like you were describing earlier. So it's very interesting, again, how thought has this tendency to control and be controlled, to possess and be possessed, to have authority and to be ruled over, and this endless cycle. And then, I really think the only way to end the cycle is to look at the implications of control and then put it in its right place, just like a robot, right? Just like with the coding of a robot. It's not the robot is bad, it's the people coding that haven't put the 10% thinking robot in its right place.
So you could almost say that thought is the fabric that holds this whole construct together.
Yes.
It's experience of duality. If we didn't have thought,
thought
then
is the construct.
right, thought is the construct. Because if we didn't have Cain failing, and if he did better than Abel the next year, then we wouldn't have the duality in the story of Cain eating Abel and having the separation. Because if Cain beat Abel, then there would be no separation. So thought is the fabric that holds us together, I guess you would say.
Yeah, it's the madness that we play with. It's this like it's a hell of a game. It is a hell of a game we play, but it's a fun one. And so the true wisdom from playing this game, getting better at this game, is choosing your experience in a way that's less I guess more desirable. And if you could even classify that as a desire, but there's routes to this experience to where it's less painful, and there are infinite routes that we can do this. There's only one path to follow, and then there's infinite variations of getting to that path. But the more that we stick on that path, it flows so much better, and it expands so much greater. So the whole idea is to recognize these sort of tendencies to fall prey to this sort of necessity of having this experience, to recognize that it's a very, very powerful thing that we're playing with. It's it goes all over the place. But then when we can honor it as such, when we can honor the whole experience as such, and honor the difficulty within it, and truly maintain that diligence to stay in that balance, then we can continually expand without these depths of falls. We don't have to go this far down into this hellhole to come back and reach new heights. We can keep experiencing that figure eight. We're always going to fall. We're always going to have the cyclical nature of falling, but the fall can be very managed. It can be much more, not necessarily controlled, but there's a diligence to it that has to be maintained. And without it, then the fall gets worse and worse. That slippery slope gets worse and worse. But knowing that the fall is inevitable, then we can prepare for it. And so that's why every solar cycle,
it's almost like to fall without the sense of I'm falling and I'm going to continue falling, just to fall and get right back up.
Yeah, to know, to appreciate the fall as a part of the process, because it helps to build that momentum and it helps to build that potential energy so that we can rise to new heights. So it's necessary. It is absolutely necessary, because God is the antithesis of God is stagnation. So this mechanism is always in place to make sure that stagnation does not occur. So it has to be there because we want to keep expanding. And so our choice is whether to expand continuously rising, with mini falls, mini falls that are giving rising to new heights, or do we want to have massive falls and hit the fucking rock bottom where we are now? And, we're going to have a massive upswing too. And that's going to be great, but let's keep that momentum going and not have to have one of these massive falls again. But that requires the persistence of everybody, that requires us all to make that choice. So I'm choosing it.
And then what's interesting is I feel like humility has this sense of being okay with the fall, like being able to risk falling. Because if you're not being able to be kicked off of your pedestal, there is no humility, So yeah, I think that's kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah, it's it's this seeing the patterns of how the base building blocks of this creation, how we got to this space and what we're doing with it, how the energy flows and how these patterns continually emerge, and then we act in alignment with them. We act in alignment with them, and it's very it introduces that ease. There is that flow, and it is just a known. We're prepared for it. We've got our we've got our parachute on when we jump out the plane. We're ready for that fall. We're ready for and then when you've got the parachute on, the fall is badass because you're skydiving. So it just turns into this whole nother experience that's bringing us to new heights, because you're using that fall as like yes, it might seem intense and it seems kind of scary because it's invigorating, it's exciting, it gives us that excitement to have that perceived sense of falling. But when I know that fall is not real, in a sense, I know it's not the end all be all.
Yeah.
It's just that springboard to launch off of, to reach new heights. And
That's probably when you wake up from the falling dream.
Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, and just embracing that process is part of this experience, knowing that, and again, going back to the game conversation, we need to introduce things like games to always be stimulating us to have these simulations of the simulation, so that we're not experiencing a drastic fall with lots of repercussions and whatever. We can have these games like chess. It's a beautiful game that will be with us for ad infinitum, because it represents that simulation of duality. It represents that simulation of falling and rising and competition, all these other sorts of things. That's healthy if it's kept only in that sense.
Exactly.
But if we let it plague us and get outside of this sort of safe space to be in, then this is when it starts to consume us, and then we fall a lot farther. So we've got to be diligent in making sure that we're always stimulating both ourselves and each other to constantly be rising, to constantly be growing, constantly be expanding. No stagnation, no complacency, and regardless, no matter what, because it always gets us back to this point, and I ain't coming back here.
Yeah, I've been thinking, I feel like nature is like the perfect organic game. I've been thinking that recently, and then we've been trying to create all these games outside of it. But yeah, I'll almost put it like this, because we had discussions of love and hate and all this kind of stuff. So I think love is healing, and let's put that at the top. Let's put that at the pinnacle. And then the disease is expressed in thousands of different ways. But the way back to love is one, meaning there's only one way, which is no acid, really, right? So it's no disease. So no choice, no option. You could look at it that way too. So if will is down here, so all of the ways the ego can fall is down here, then to go up, back up is no will. So I've had this theory for a long time with Raji's model and stuff too. It's like the higher frequency you go, the less choice that there is involved in it. Like there's less of a me that is choosing in it. Because again, if love is like unity and like communion and like union and one, and then if hate is separation, so it's distance, So you see what I'm saying? It's like it's all fallen apart. Yeah, that would kind of make sense. Like that kind of, what kind of a shape is that? I don't know. Like some kind of
Triangle.
yeah, I don't know. It's like there's a one point up here, and then that one point
No, it's a
fragments and shatters
it's a
all down.
torus. It's a torus field. It's half a torus field.
Yeah, it's half a torus field. Exactly. It's a hyperbola, a lower hyperbola. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean it's that same, just giving all, giving choice back up to God, knowing that we're getting closer to Him, releases those choices, releases those confusion, releases those torments, releases those the hellish, the realm that we're in, because we have to, that's the waste, that's the weight that holds us down. So
Doesn't
as
it, Aaron, real quick, doesn't it make sense that hell would be a choice? You see what I'm saying? Like, to me, I don't feel like God would ever put you through hell if you didn't choose it. You
no,
see what I'm saying?
if they left us alone, we would figure this out. That's what if they left us alone, we already know what's going on. We already know the connection with God. It's their interference with that. It's their constant from birth, and the torment and the trauma that they put on us that just disconnects us from that connection with God from the get-go. So absolutely, it's, you know yeah, totally insanity that they chose us. We chose, however you want to look at it, created this experience for us to wake up to this insanity that we are playing in. But it is a game. It's a very serious game to get back up to that, the clarity, give away our free will, to find our sovereignty, to take on that self responsibility that the society does not want us to do. They want us to sit there and wait with our hand out and wait for somebody to give us our check and feed our, and that's not taking self-responsibility. That's not being sovereign. That is not going to get us closer to God, because there is a lot of responsibility getting away from the system. You have to be your own lawyer, your own doctor, everything. You have to be self-responsible for every aspect of your life. And that's a lot of the learning and a lot of the knowing that needs to come is, yeah, it's great to be love and light, but you're not going to be love and light and have no responsibility like most of the ones do. They don't want to have the responsibility of what it truly means to get closer to God, what it truly means to give up your free will, because you have to be there to defend every aspect of the one system that's fighting. Like Justin was saying, the reference of the Matrix, everything around you is your enemy until they're ready to turn on the light and come with you as well.
Yeah, until the ship turns over. Hey, Justin, I think this was great. I think you should say some last thoughts and just end it since you're host.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, thanks for the inspiration to hop on this random live. Thank you to all who have hopped in to hear us, and to any who will be hearing us in the future in that made up space that we invent. Because all there is now. But I appreciate everyone for being here, and thanks for just always sharing all that you are, Eugene. You do it so selflessly, and you've got that just infectious energy that I love experiencing. So every conversation is always a joy. So yeah, let's keep doing this. Let's keep doing these lives. We'll keep coming on the Star Show. Always love you coming on a Telegram too. Just keep the conversation going, because the more that we can talk about this kind of stuff, even though we're all talking about the same thing, and ad nauseum, we will keep talking about the same thing. But the more ways that we can express this one thing, that's poetry, and that's the creativity. That's what gets me so excited about discussing these kinds of things, because we are talking about the same stuff, but it's in so many different ways, so many different beautiful ways that it just weaves it all together in such a beautiful painting, a beautiful tapestry. So yeah, thanks all for this. And did you guys have anything you wanted to say too?
Just to add to what you said, different sparks, one fire.
Yeah, no, just thank you, Eugene, for sparking this improv live, and Justin for being host. And most you can find Justin at justinord.com. I got my channel up on Telegram. I guess you could find you on Justin Carpenter or on Telegram as well. I'm on Aaron X Jesse on Telegram, also on YouTube. Haven't really posted that much up there. Eugene on Telegram. Are you all one on Telegram as well?
I think so, but you can find me on my link tree. There
you go. Yeah, there you go. That's the easiest way. Linktree for, I guess, Justin and Eugene as well. So I guess I should set up mine, make it easy. But I love
Yes.
you guys all. Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. Love y'all mucho. And just to clarify, justincarpenter.org is my site. And yeah, on Telegram you can find me, and let's just keep the conversation going, because the more that we can talk about this kind of stuff, the better, because this is the only thing to talk about. So let's talk about it. All right. Love you guys so much, and y'all take care.